Joining me now is Drew Cagle, who, along with his band The Reputation, has a great new song out called All Figured Out. And our audio audience will hear a little of that after we're done chatting. But for right now, welcome to the show, Drew Cagle. Drew, how are you doing today?
Not too bad, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Great to get a chance to meet you here. And in listening to the song, listened to it a few times. It's great. We'll talk a little bit about the song itself. I'll figure it out. But I wanted to kind of find out a little bit about your background. So the notes are telling me that you're from Central Illinois. So talk a little bit about kind of growing up musically in that scene and how part of the problem you ran into is that people mostly wanted like tribute acts and cover bands, right?
Yeah, so I'm from a little town called Fisher, just outside of Champaign in Central Illinois, and uh, growing up, Cheap Trick and REO were all bands that came out of the area that I always really looked up to, and I'd seen them all a bunch of times and stuff like that. And once I decided that I truthfully wanted to pursue music as a career and a passion, I I looked up to those guys, and I wanted to make music that was new and real and felt authentic to people, and I wanted my words to be able to move people just like theirs did to me. And when I went to pursue that, kind of like you mentioned earlier, I was a little surprised to be met with a by a reaction that was kind of people that were just like, yeah, we're not interested. We don't care what you have to say. We don't really want to listen to what you have to give us. Just because, a young, naive rocker uh, thinks that, right when you start, you're going to be the greatest of all time and everything's going to blow up for you
Sure.
and everything. And uh, I was met with the exact opposite of that. So I just kind of had to pivot and turn and figure out. Uh, it wasn't that I ever doubted that the quality of the music or anything like that. I just realized, hey, this isn't working. The people that live down the street don't really care that I play music, which is fine, and no one wants to. The rock stars that everyone looks up to never live two houses over, right? They
Right.
always are some larger than life character that's from far away, and they're always on the road and stuff like that build up to this rock star persona. And once I realized that, I completely set my sights on other things and other cities and major cities, not just the small towns around Illinois, because they were a lot more open to something new and something fresh than a town that has just that I'm not special at. I'm not special down the street.
Right. I mean, to that point, it's, nobody runs into Mick Jagger in the elevator, while they're waiting
Ex-
to get to the 10th floor, So
exactly,
it's hard to think about it in that same way. And, I've talked to a number of musicians who are parts of, actually fairly successful touring like tribute bands. And even those bands, there's the issue of, yeah, we would love to do, like a show where we do an entire album from the band, but they kind of also want us to play the greatest hits, so you
Yeah,
have to kind of be careful. And it's like, look, on the one hand, I get it, especially if you're out at a bar or a club, there's songs you want to hear, maybe for as a guy, it might need to be a song if I'm going to get up the courage to be like, hey, come on, let's dance. It's not going to be to a new song,
yeah,
but
exactly.
also, it's probably the people that run the bar or any kind of establishment. It's like, well, we'll sell more drinks if we get that. I can understand sort of the business side of that, but at the same time, I don't know how you're ever going to find anything new. How are you going to find your new favorite band?
Well, yeah.
In
The
in 1990, I went to see Aerosmith on the Pump tour, and the
Oh
Black
man,
Crows opened up for them. And I would have heard the Black Crows on MTV, but when you see a band for the first time, and you're like, oh, I love this, and I always try. A lot of times it's hard. I was going to say something, but it's like there's a lot of times you'll go to a show and there's like four bands, and then the first band might go on at 6 o'clock, and I'm like, all right, I can't make it there for that band, but I always like to check out some of opening bands. And look, sometimes the opening band might be a band that I'm like, I don't think I like them, but you know what? Let me check them out live. And I think people have kind of lost that even when they're going to a big show from an established artist, you know?
Yeah, well, I kind of like you said, I think the best part about music is the first time you hear your new favorite artist. I think that's always been the best part about music. There's something that your new favorite song or your new favorite artist just energizes you, and you just feel you can. It feels like you can breathe clearly again. When something speaks to you through the music. That's always what's the most special thing to me, and that's what I try to achieve, and that's why I'm such a big advocate for original music, is because I'm never going to be able to give you that feeling playing singing someone else's words or singing you a song that you've heard 1,000 times before. But just like that, I've met or I've discovered a lot of my favorite artists the same way you just said with the Black Crowes. I saw the Struts open up for um, the Foo Fighters on one of their big tours, and I've been one of the biggest Struts fans in the world since then, and so many
Yeah,
other bands like that.
and it's great when bands follow sort of that old model. A lot of times it's like you'll get the co-headlines because everybody wants to sell more tickets and all that. But when you do have an actual like opening band, somebody that maybe you've heard a song or two, but you don't really know, I think that's always sort of fun. So as you're talking about wanting to represent yourself and your own music, did you find that, okay, well, I can do a set where I can sprinkle in my original songs? And did you do some covers, or were you more adamant about like, look, I'm doing my songs for half an hour, so you better get ready to listen?
It's definitely the second one, man. I've been
Yeah.
I'm a hard ass when it comes to that stuff. My job, I've always felt like, and my calling is to move people. And if I've got 10 songs, or if I've got the spot for 10 songs, then at least 9 of them better be me trying to do what I believe my calling is. I can
Sure.
throw in a song or two to keep you interested, and I'll do that every once in a while. I'm not against covers. If you do them the right way, or especially if you do a cover and it feels new. If you change it a little bit, make it into your style. That stuff, I do that as well. But no, when I got started, very much the reputation side, and a lot of these uh, assumptions that have been made about me are very, very much rooted in in me not playing covers like people ask me to.
Right. So that's the reputation of the reputation, is like, oh, this is that guy who's not going to do any covers. Yeah.
Well, it's an accumulation of so many different things and so many different people's opinions of me over a lot of time, and it was a combination of that, and it was a combination of a few other things, and at the time I was at the point where I was like, well, everybody has something different that they're saying about me that I'm rather terrible to work with, or I'm this or I'm that, and I was just like, well, looks like it's just time to lean into it. If people are going to say that I'm this and I'm that, then I'm going to say that I'm that as well. And you're just going to have to come to the show to decide for yourself if I'm a terrible person, if I don't suck, if the originals are worth listening to, and figure out what my reputation is for you on your own. And that's kind of what I dug into, and it really worked out for me after I went in.
Yeah, no, I think that it's almost like I think you'll have the segment of the audience that kind of appreciates, like, all right, yeah, he's kind of lost half the crowd, but the other half he's like winning over with each song as we go along. And you sort of, as you're talking about it, I was thinking, one of the bands you mentioned, obviously, Cheap Trick being from Rockford, Illinois. They are obviously still tremendous to see live. They still are out there for plenty of dates every year, but they are also one of those bands who maybe not every year, but every year or two puts out a new album. And you're going to hear some songs from the new album, and maybe you want it to be Surrender or Dream Police, but you're going to have to wait for those. And I kind of like it. I mean, about a month ago, I saw the Rolling Stones here in LA at the football stadium, and they probably did 5 new songs from their album Hackney Diamonds, which is a great new album. I understand if you're the Stones, you've been at it for I was going to say 50 years. You've been at it for 60 years, and you're like, and every song was great, Drew, but the new songs, you could tell that they were feeling it a little bit more because they haven't played those 1,000, 10,000 times, you know?
Yeah. Well, well, kind of like you said earlier, I've been lucky enough that I really don't have the experience of losing the crowd often because of my originals. We have such high energy shows that
Great.
it, we're good enough that we can make people feel it, no matter what the song is. But yeah, just the people like you said. I mean, Cheap Trick's last few records have been incredible. Hackney Diamonds is stellar. I'd put it up with any of their top records.
Sure.
And the thing that I always say is that a lot of people, just as a listener, don't understand is that when you write a song, you are the most connected to that song that you'll ever be at the exact moment you write the song. And every minute and day and year that passes, the farther you grow into a different person, you get away from that original feeling of that song. So then every single time you have to go to perform it, or if you have to go into the studio and record it, you're a different person than you were when you first wrote that song and had that initial feeling. So every time you go to perform it, you have to put yourself in that mindset that you were in back then. And the farther that gap gets, the harder it is to truthfully, as an artist, put yourself into that place where you can move people with that song if they haven't already taken that song and ran with it. And especially when you're in a situation like the Stones, or even us, we've been doing it for 10 years. They've been doing it forever. But when you're in a situation like that, the thing that makes it exciting for us is, as an artist and as a songwriter, is always the new thing. Because if we have a new song, that's what we feel like who we are at that point in time. I always love playing new songs for that exact reason. It's because I feel so connected to it at that point in time, and it feels the most relevant to me the newer it is, because I've grown as an artist and I've grown as a songwriter and I've grown as a person, and I want to show you these new concepts and ideas and who I am at that point in time. And when it comes to playing new songs, I truthfully encourage every artist to do so. I know people hate it when when people says that, and everyone wants to go get a drink when the new song comes on and stuff. But if you just sit there with an open mind, just the same way you did when you heard the first song you ever liked from that band, I'm sure they'll impress you, because that's where you find the magic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think that there were a number of artists, huge artists, Aerosmith being one of them, who, unfortunately had to basically retire from touring. But their last album was like 12 years ago. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to make anymore because we're tired of watching people go to the beer line or the bathroom. But and again, when you're Aerosmith and you're the Stones and you have so many songs to choose from, I guess there's that one thing where it's like, yeah, but if you play that song, and then maybe a little bit later you play another song, they're not going to, well, maybe some people are going to get a beer every new song. But for the most part, people be like, all right, let me settle in for this new song. And I look, it's whatever the artists want to do. You can respect sort of their approach to it. But I personally, I like it when somebody's excited to play the new stuff. As huge a band as Iron Maiden are, they're kind of infamous for their casual fans that if you go and see them, it's usually like 70% new album, 30% sort of the back catalog stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you don't have the new album, you may not have as much fun as you think you're going to. And they're very, they're not defiant about it. They're like, hey, this is what we do. So, and even if it's like, a festival show, you're still going to hear the new stuff. And I definitely, I think I'd be bummed out if bands only played new stuff, because you'll have bands, another Chicago area guy. There was a stretch where Billy Corgan didn't like to play the old Smashing Pumpkins songs. And I'm like, all right, but how about a couple? Can you give me a few? You want to show off the new album, I get that, but I'd like to hear some of the songs from high school. You don't need to do 10, but how about 5, 4? Is 4 too much to ask? Do a medley, and it's interesting, because when somebody doesn't want to play the new stuff, you're like, I mean, doesn't want to play the old stuff. You're like, all right, but
Yeah.
you're gonna have to work that much harder. And a band, somebody like Billy Corgan can probably pull it off, and the majority of the crowd's going to be okay. But it's definitely a very conscious decision. And you being at it for 10 years, as you're saying, Drew, obviously you might be like, okay, well, this vibe from the crowd, maybe I'm going to pull out this older original song, that might fit this moment better than what I was planning. Do you find that maybe that happens a little bit more often, instead of like, well, I'm going to go on a crutch and use a cover song, but all right, maybe a little bit more up tempo here or something?
Yeah, I mean that's the magic of the live shows, and that's what makes it all so much fun is set list placement and picking the songs and them being different every night. The internet kind of ruined it for a lot of fans, where you have the setlist.com and stuff that you can go and look up, and you can see what used to be where they go into a different city and you never knew what they were playing. But they could be playing the exact same set every single night, and you didn't know, but unless you went to every single show. But now you can see who's kind of phoning in and playing the same set every night, and you can see who is going out of their way to craft a different show and a different musical journey for the fans every single night now, because people log it on the internet. And I think that's the fun part of it, is making sure you testing the audience, calling audibles in the middle of the show. If you're like, you know what, maybe I called this wrong on the set list, and I don't think they're ready for this song yet. Maybe the song needs to come in about 2 songs later. We do that a lot. That's a lot of fun for me, because that feels a lot more personal with the crowd. You can feel where they're going. It's just the same way. It's the same way as if you were like hanging out with your friends, and your phone's plugged in to the speakers, and you're picking all the songs. And you are the one in charge of making sure the vibe of the night goes the right way. You wouldn't start off with a ballad, right? You'd probably start off with something that would get the energy up and keep it going until it's time to move people to a new place. And that's kind of the fun part for me, is figuring out what the right time is to change people's feelings and stuff.
Yeah, no, you're talking about websites like setlist.fm is probably the one that's that's the one that's the most updated. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with that. When I'm deciding about going to see a band, sometimes I like to know, what are they playing on this tour, and you look at a few dates and you go, okay, I got a feel for what I am going to see. The thing that will drive me crazy is like somebody sitting in my row is like looking at the set list as they're going along. I'm like, all right, maybe you looked beforehand, but do you want to be a little bit surprised? The one thing I'll say about living in LA, I do usually like to know what a band's last song is going to be, because I gotta get to the parking lot before everyone else. Otherwise it's going to take me, 4 hours to get home. And that's the good thing about Kiss is going to always end with Rock and Roll All Night, and Aerosmith's going to always end with Walk This Way. So it helps when the Stones, I knew Satisfaction was the last song, so I didn't duck out. I was watching, but I did move to the end of the row during Satisfaction so I could get right up the stairs. So, but I like when it's like, oh my God, they didn't play this at all on any of the dates on the tour. I do like when bands call an audible. And it can definitely be fun, especially when it is a band that I appreciate sort of the deeper, the nooks and crannies of their catalog, maybe albums that weren't their best selling, but they're like, yeah, we still like some of these songs. So I like seeing bands try out the new stuff, but I do also like, okay, again, using Aerosmith as an example, all right, you like Toys in the Attic, and we play those few songs, but what if we play Adam's Apple instead? And I'm like, yes, I would love that. That would be great. Thank you. So there's always a little bit of that. One of the things I wanted to go back to is what you were talking about. You're in such a different place when you record a song, and each time you do it live. It reminded me of just reading years and years ago, and I don't know if it's still the case now, but there was a point that Billy Joel couldn't perform Just the Way You Are, because he wrote it for his first wife, And
Uptown Girl
it
was
was
the same way for him
yeah,
too.
right. It's the same thing because that's for Christy Brinkley, and in both cases, unfortunately, he got divorced. So there's that period of time is like one, I'm not feeling it, but with just the way you are, it's like he couldn't really remember. He couldn't keep the song straight in his head,
Yeah.
And this is before I think before Axl Rose kind of made it. On Vogue to have the monitors with the lyrics scrolling after he did that, everybody's like, all right, yeah, let's just have it. But anyway, so I can see that as sort of being the issue there. Just sort of I'm not who I am anymore when I did that song. And maybe you move on for it. Maybe you bust it out once in a while. So do you have any stuff that maybe like you did used to have in the set going back 10 years? Like, oh yeah, we try to play that in every show, but then you just kind of got away from it for any number of reasons?
That's a great question. Before I get into that, I'll say Billy Joel is a perfect example of pretty much our entire conversation. He stopped recording new material for about like 20 years or something.
It was like
And,
30. He did the River of
and
Dreams album, and then like last year maybe he put
yeah,
out a new song for like the first time since then. Yeah.
yeah, and you know what? That's a main reason why I argue of how important it is to put out new music and stuff like that. Is well, one, it was great to see him. It was great to miss him and then hear that song because that song's absolutely incredible. I
I
love that
agree.
song,
Yeah, that sounds
and
great.
um, it was great to be moved by him another time. And I think we're all fortunate to have been able to witness that song, and whether it's in moments of his last few live shows or it's the moments of at the Grammys or whatever. I think Billy Joel is just a perfect example of pretty much everything we touched on. Um, as far as a song that's been in our set that got moved out, or that I kind of shied away from a little bit. Um, there's been a few. I mean, when I first got started, I played a lot of shows on my solo, and I played a lot of shows with my piano. And a lot of the songs from our first record were written on piano and turned into rock songs afterwards. So there's plenty of songs that used to be played that just don't get played anymore because the piano doesn't fit in the van. um, but uh, but our first single we ever released, "Off the Wall," was the first song that I ever wrote, and that's a song. That song and 415 to Denver have been two songs that were in a lot were the set every single set for forever. And 415 to Denver never really leaves. It gets cut every once in a while if we're short on time or something, but it's normally towards the end of the show. Uh, but Off the Wall in recent years has um, become a little bit more of a kind of a scarce in the set. It's definitely a fan favorite, but it's become one kind of like you said that gets thrown out when I'm seeing if people are paying attention or if I can really tell that we have some diehard Drew Cagle fans in the audience, then I'll pull Off the Wall out. But mostly the sets we've been doing have been a lot of new material. I love to try new material on the road and just like play it to death just to make sure we have everything ready before it's time to record it and make sure the songs are in a place where they can all move people. So when you come to our shows, primarily what you're going to hear is you know, a decent amount of unreleased stuff mixed in with like you said, the few songs that the fans have to hear.
Yeah, well, speaking of songs, let's talk about All Figured Out. And the understanding I have from the notes is that that song sort of is specifically targeting maybe people who sort of were negative, either impact in your life or sort of a negative force trying to, I don't want to say hold you back literally, but sort of in the way. And it might even be that vibe of like, oh yeah, we only book cover bands here. We don't want to hear your originals. Talk a little bit about All Figured Out and how it kind of addresses, some of that element that you ran into early on.
Yeah, I wouldn't say All Figured Out has a specific message or is a specific shot at anyone, um, you know, personally or anything like that. It's kind of an anthem that's a collection of so many different feelings that I've had in the last few years, and definitely when we were getting started, like we were talking about earlier. There's definitely an element of that. The blowback in the beginning towards me wanting to be solely an original artist in a place where that was unheard of at the time. Um, but then there was many other things as you grow and people make judgments of you, and as you try to pursue your dream and people that maybe don't pursue theirs, um, they make assumptions and they judge people um, that do things they don't want to do or things like that. And I just wanted to make a song that encapsulated that chip on your shoulder energy, and that energy that's, you know, everyone knows what it's like to have someone that thinks they have you all figured out, thinks that you're, you know, a no good person, whether it's your boss, you know, at your job, saying you can't ever do anything right, whether it's your ex-wife or something, whether it's anything like that. Everyone has that person that's like, no matter what you do, uh, or even if you've only had a small interaction with them, they think they've got every element of who you are already down to a T, and that you'll never change. And this song is that song, um, for the people that just maybe be like, all right, well, if that's what you think, then you really seem to have me all figured out. Then I'll let you keep it. But this is what actually is the truth. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So the song has, you know, it definitely has, you know, a sound that I'm trying to like hear influences when I hear a band, and obviously, sort of the way there's the sort of the opening notes, it's got a little bit of a vibe of the Who, and there's
absolutely.
definitely sort of like an, you know, more like 80s hard rock vibe, you know, which for people who know me is a huge compliment. I guess as I'm talking, I realize somebody might throw that out and say that in a disparaging way, but I love that music. I grew up with all that music. And what do you think were some of, not specifically for that song, what were some of the biggest influences? You know, we talked about REO, we talked about Cheap Trick, but just whether it's bands on the radio, your friends like saying, hey, check out this album, or maybe who you got to see live when you were younger, who do you think were some of the bands that were like, oh, I love what they do, I want to do that too?
Man, I mean, I'm influenced by so many different things, and I think any true songwriter should be influenced by every song they listen to, or influenced by everything they see around them, because that's in any place you can get inspiration, you should take it. Um, so I'm definitely influenced by so many different artists, which I know isn't what you wanted, so I'll give you a few. Um, you know, Guns N' Roses was, I saw them in 2016 on the Not in This Lifetime tour. I think the first or second show they got back together. That show changed my life and made me want to do it, pursue music as a full time thing. And you know, I've seen the Stones too, a similar thing. There's many modern artists too, Rival Sons, The Struts,
Oh
Glorious
yeah,
Sons that I love.
yeah, they're
Um,
all great. Yeah.
and then there's also, you know, there's artists in different genres. I mean, I love Eminem. I love Matt Mason. I love Ian No. I love Garth Brooks. Anyone that I can notably see moves people with their music has the capability to move me with their music, is a
Well,
major influence.
until I was having this conversation with you right now, I never would have tried to compare Garth Brooks and Eminem. But what I will say is that they're both like excellent storytellers. They tell their stories in a very different way,
Yeah,
but you're along for the ride the whole time. And
absolutely.
obviously, Garth Brooks, you know, hugely influenced by Kiss, and he did that Alter
Yeah,
Ego, Christine's character, which was geez, like 30 years ago now. But,
people are still talking about it. So it must have done something that
it must
worked.
have done something. Yeah. One of my best friends, she's been on the show a number of times. She's in radio in Nashville. Her name's Carson. She's seen Def Leppard like 75 times, but she's seen Garth Brooks like 60 times. So there's huge crossover appeal, I think, for a lot of people because he puts on, a big show, a great show. You're talking about Guns N' Roses when they brought Duff and Slash back, the Not in This Lifetime tour. That was tremendous. It was great because I saw them in sort of that in between time where it was really just Axl and some other great musicians, but it didn't have the same feeling. I'm not a huge fan. Like I'm good with an arena show. I don't always love stadium shows because I've never been in the pit at a stadium show. I've never been on the floor. So I was usually so far behind, but as I'm about to give you this anecdote, I'm reminded of a shirt that I've seen, a t-shirt that says, I might be old, but I saw all the great concerts. And sometimes I feel like that's true. So there was a tour in 1992 where essentially the second headliner was Metallica. Guns N' Roses went on before them, and Faith No More opened. So this was in 1992. And I'm like, that's the perfect stadium show. Those bands are all a little bit different, but there's huge crossover appeal for everybody. They put on an amazing show. And I think for me, I realized, I don't have any musical ability, but maybe I'll try and talk and write about music and, get into radio and eventually podcasting and that sort of a thing. But yeah, when you see somebody, and I'm using all three of those bands, that they're that good at what they do, it's hard to not be impressed,
Absolutely.
And the fact that I actually don't know how old Axl is, but he must be 60 now, and the fact that they still do like 3.5 hour shows. I know some people might get turned off by that, but if it like 2 hours and 50 minutes, the opening Tacoma starts, I'm like, great. These next 10 minutes are going to be legendary,
Yeah.
So.
Axl is, in my opinion, the absolute best there is when it comes to planning the set or making the set list move you and take you on a musical journey through all this stuff. I mean, we're talking about 3 hours. There's maybe 3 or 4 bands that can keep you enthralled in their music for 3 hours. Just kind of like what you said. And Axl's the way he puts songs to run into each other and the way he can make you feel like you want to run through a wall in 1 minute and then call your ex and tell her you love her in the next minute is just absolutely incredible. And that's when I saw that show, and I've seen him a bunch of times, but that specific show was at Soldier Field in Chicago, and we were, like you said, we were nowhere near the pit. We were quite the opposite. We were probably at the top of the thing all the way back. And I'm watching people dressed up as Slash and Axl sitting next to me, so far away from them, you can't even see them besides the jumbotron. And people are crying and stuff, and he's in Axl's songs, and all of their playing, and the way he chose what time it was to go into these different songs moved people that couldn't even see him. And obviously it wasn't album quality, so there's some other element there that is truthfully connecting to people when you can't even see them. And after I saw that, I was like, well, there's nothing I would rather do.
Yeah, I like to say that I'm usually in the seats where you need binoculars to see the jumbotron. That's how far back we are. And look, we're talking about lesser appreciated, quote unquote, newer music. And Axl's like, look, I'm going to play for 3.5 hours, so I'm going to play 5 songs from Chinese Democracy. So you do what you want with that. And look, I don't love that album. Well, I was going to say I don't love that album, but as time has gone by, I appreciate it more. And to kind of tie it all together, Drew, one of the things that helped was seeing them live. It's that same tour. I saw them here at Dodger Stadium, and I was like, yeah, I should give that a listen again. And there are a few songs that I actually like a lot on that album. I think that just when it came out, we had waited.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 2008. So we waited. I'm not counting the spaghetti incident. We'd been waiting like 17 years, and I'd read about him working on that album for 10 years, and I was just like, oh, it was never going to live up to that hype. But Drew, you're talking about being a little younger. You didn't wait 10 years for it. You were probably like, oh, what are all the Guns N' Roses albums? Okay, this is one of them. And I think being able to find it, it's almost like somebody, binges a TV series in like a couple of weeks and they see all 6 seasons. And it's like, yeah, those of us that lived through those 6 years, we have a very different feeling about it. But you're able to kind of consume it all at once, and you're not swayed by really anything, any of the outside factors. And I appreciate that he does it. And I like that they slip in a Velvet Revolver song sometimes. They do a little bit of some different stuff.
Yeah, they're masterful with their set list placement, and especially with the covers they do. They have a huge list of covers they do, and they do the exact same thing that I said is so important. Is if you're going to do a cover, you need to change it. It needs to be a Guns N' Roses song, written by somebody else, and that's what it is. Nobody plays Knocking on Heaven's Door like them. Nobody plays Live and Let Die like them. But they do The Seeker, and it sounds like it was right off Appetite. Like all those songs sound so great when they do them, and the reason that they sound that great is because they make them their own. And we could fill this whole podcast 10 times over with me talking about Guns N' Roses. So
yeah, no, exactly. And there's a reason. It's the band is so legendary based on a very limited studio output, but they are still great. The one point I'll make on that before we start to wrap up is same venue. I've seen Guns N' Roses at Dodger Stadium. I've seen them do Live and Let Die, lots of, flames and explosions and things. I've also seen Paul McCartney do Live and Let Die at Dodger Stadium, flames and explosions. Wow. I think it was the end of I think it was the last song in his encore. And the feeling, there's a commonality to it, but they are very different, and ultimately the soul is the same, but it is one of those things where you're like, yeah, this is a great song. Here's the guy who did it first, but then also these guys put a spin on it. And I won't rope you into disparaging any bands, but no, I love the band Weezer, but they did a cover of Africa by Toto that is like note for note the same song. And I was like, well, I love Weezer. Why did they do that? I wanted to hear like their version of it. And I'll use that more as an example, though. There's times where bands do cover songs and you're like, well, why did you do that? You didn't change anything,
Yeah, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. When Paul McCartney plays Live and Let Die, he sits there and he puts his mindset back to where he was when he wrote it.
Right.
When Guns N' Roses plays Live and Let Die, they go and they put their mindset back to where it was when they heard it the first time. So those feelings are different, and they should be different. And you should convey those separate feelings when it comes to covering the song. And I think that's what makes a good cover and what makes a bad cover is when you try to mimic how somebody else felt when they wrote the song. It's just not going to come out the right way. But when you replicate how the song made you feel, that's where you find magic in those.
Yeah, and I like when bands will take songs from different genres and kind of put their spin on it, and I think that there's some big examples of things like that, like the Limp Bizkit Faith comes to mind, which it's not my favorite one of those, but it's the first one I thought of. There's a band originally from Cincinnati, they were on Sub Pop Records originally, called the Afghan Wigs, and they do TLC's Creep, but it's really slowed down, and it's almost like an old crooner song, and it's like I love stuff like that, and I think a lot of artists appreciate when somebody does that. My understanding is Mick Jagger loved Devo's version of Satisfaction because it doesn't sound even remotely like their Satisfaction. They put the Devo spin on it. Anyway, Drew, we could talk about covers and Guns N' Roses and all this stuff all day, but I'm going to post this on Thursday, so I want to let everybody know that there are some tour dates for Drew Cagle and The Reputation from your website. They just go to drewcagle.com. You're in Minnesota and in Michigan over the course of the next week. And I know you did some shows with Mr. Big. Are these shows with them or are these solo shows?
So we've been on the All Figured Out tour for about 2.5, 3 months now, and we are just here getting close to the end. So the next show, the shows in Minnesota are both headline shows, and then our show in Michigan is with Goodbye June as we're opening. The shows with Mr. Big were earlier this year, also in Michigan. Last weekend we played with Great White and Slaughter, and we had a bunch. We had 3 shows with Stryper. We've been very lucky on this All Figured Out tour to have just a perfect mix of playing with some of the greatest bands from the 70s and 80s and all the way up to modernized rock bands, and then having some awesome headline shows mixed in with them. So we've been very fortunate.
Yeah, it's a great mix because all the bands you mentioned, listening to what I've heard, I'm like, oh yeah, you would absolutely fit in with any of those bands. A crowd showing up for Great White or Slaughter are going to catch a few of your songs and go like, oh, I want to hear more. So I think that's great. DrewCagle.com and the song we've been talking about, and again, our audio audience will hear All Figured Out. What's next? Should people just keep an eye on the website, social media? What are the plans for the rest of this year into next year, Drew?
So we have some really big things in the works right now. You can definitely expect a new single coming up soon as we wrap up the All Figured Out chapter of this new book that we're getting ready to put you guys through. There's definitely something new coming. So I can't go too far into it, but I can say to make sure you're not behind when we roll out the next phase of this, make sure to check out All Figured Out. You can follow us on Spotify and Instagram and Facebook and everything like that. We'll be posting like crazy as we figure out what's next.
Yeah, and I mean that's sort of the advent of being a fan of bands, musicians, honestly, fans of anyone, comedians, authors, artists, whatever, is like, oh, I want to know what they're up to. I'm just going to go ahead and hit that one button, and then I'm going to see when they have something new, and you can post videos and all that. So it's great. Drew, it's been wonderful getting a chance to chat with you. This has been great. We've been talking for more than 40 minutes and easily could have done another 40 talking about more of our favorite bands and favorite concerts. But I appreciate you taking the time. Everybody go to drewcagle.com. And as he's talking about, subscribe on Spotify and follow all those other places. And again, for our audience, our audio audience, you can give a listen All Figured Out